Hey y'all, it's Angela, and welcome back to Black History 2025 Resistance. And today we are going to be talking specifically about Black trans resistance, giving honor to the ancestor Francis Thompson. We're going to start it on a little bit of a somber note. We want to lift up the name of our brother Sam Nordquist, who was murdered recently. And we want his name lifted. We want justice for him. We want his life celebrated. And all of our trans siblings around the country who are enduring attacks coming from the White House, from Congress, from people in the streets who think that it is okay to victimize our trans family, our non-binary family, our gender non-conforming family. We want it understood that y'all are loved, you are supported, and it is the duty of those of us who are cisgender, wherever we fall or do not fall on the LGBTQ plus rainbow. It is our duty as cisgender people, if we call ourselves accomplices, to stand up and speak out against the violence that is being endured by our trans and gender non-conforming and non-binary family. So we lift up the name of Sam Nordquist. We send love to his family and to his community and all of those who knew and loved him. We send our love to him and tell you to rest in power and rest in love, and may justice be done for you, and be done soon, and be done swiftly, whatever that justice looks like. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. And to our trans, and as I said, trans and gender non-conforming and non-binary family, know that you are loved, know that you are seen, know that the violence being done to you is going to be called out wherever we see it. And it is unacceptable. And no matter how dark it is right now, it's not always going to be like this. So just know I see you, I love you, and we're here. So we're going to talk about this dope ancestor, Francis Thompson. And like I said, my name is Angela, and I'm covering someone who is very close to my heart now that I've met her, and very close to my queer little heart. And a whole lot of people are thinking that LGBTQIA plus resistance began with the Stonewall uprising, which we're going to cover, in the June of 1969, but that's not the case. Queer and transgender Black people have been resisting oppression within these borders since at least the 19th century that we know of, and I would say highly likely even before that, even if it did not make any history books. I'm fairly sure that it happened. So today we will be lifting up the revolutionary, and I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit later on how her life was indeed revolutionary. Life and Resistance of Francis Thompson. And first things first, transgender, gender non-conforming, and non-binary people have always existed. Let me say that again. And I'm going to say that for these folks in the back that want to act like stuff is brand new just because they've been trying to be in denial about it their whole lives and haven't had to acknowledge the existence of people who are not cis-het. And for people who are not familiar with the terminology, I have a reference that I'm going to include in the show notes for you, but cisgender heterosexual people. Let me say that again in the back. Trans people, non-binary people, gender non-conforming people have always existed. They will always exist. Intersex people have always existed. So this isn't new. And according to the AMBA Africa Justice Initiative, Historical evidence shows that transgender and non-binary identities existed in pre-colonial African societies and were respected and accepted. In Senegal, gender identities were understood within the philosophy of Sutura, and if I'm mispronouncing that, please correct me. Sutura, which states that individuals are all equal to each other, all are worthy of honor, protection, and freedom from shame. Sutura is also a discouragement against violating others' right to privacy. I thought was really interesting. And it checks people who gossip disrespectfully about others. And I would imagine such a philosophy existing in the United States. But from Ethiopia to Angola to Ghana, there is evidence of the acceptance of transgender and non-binary folks. And according to the University of California, anthropologists have long acknowledged the cultures worldwide that were welcoming to people who lived and presented themselves outside of the gender binary. And if y'all are wondering what all of these terms, like I said a little earlier, if y'all are not up on what all the terminology means, do not worry. I am going to be including resources in the notes to this episode that can explain them. And at the end of the day, it appears that the repression of LGBTQIA+ identities and communities in Africa is a direct result of European colonization. So for all of the folks walking around talking about, this disdain or repression or ill feeling to people who are members of the LGBTQIA+ community is something that is intrinsic to Africa, that is not true. That is not true. That is something that was imposed on Africa with the invasion of European missionaries and colonists. And just to preface, bringing it forward to the 19th century where Francis Thompson lives, it's hard to imagine a more depraved, a more cruel institution than chattel slavery in the colony that became the United States. And it cannot be overstated what a massive and beautiful accomplishment that it was and is for Africans enslaved within these borders to remain in their humanity, to maintain their folk ways, to maintain their food ways, to maintain their cultural memory of all the things that have been attempted to be ripped from them. I am always going to celebrate that resilience and honor that faith in understanding and knowing who we are as a people, who we were, and holding on to those things that make us who we are. And we're going to celebrate that, and we're always going to lift that up because that was not a small thing. And so let's meet Miss Frances. Into the deep evil of enslavement, Frances Thompson was born in Alabama around 1840. And while much of her early life is unknown, she was living as a free woman in the Black community established in Memphis, Tennessee. When she was about 26 years old, she was documented that's where she was living. And she worked as a laundress, and she lived her truth as a transgender woman. And I'll give y'all a trigger warning here right now for racist mob violence and SA. In May of, so if you need to jump forward maybe about 50 seconds or so, I'm not going to be digging into the details of what happened, but we will be discussing, I'm going over what happened. In May of 1866, a white police officer attempted to arrest a Black ex-soldier, and Black folks who witnessed this intervened, as they should have. They were able to stop the police from taking the former soldier to jail, but their initiative angered white Memphians, many of whom were newly immigrated Irish who were already riled up because of the competition for jobs that was happening between them and newly emancipated Africans. They were angry about that. They didn't think that they should have to compete with newly emancipated people for work. They felt like it was something they should just be able to get, and that wasn't the case. And it's really unclear where the shooting began, but Black families and community members were very quickly attacked. Their homes, schools, and churches were burned. And according to Black Past, white Northerners who had set up schools for Black children also were victimized. So I think it's a tale that any one of us who is familiar with Rosewood, familiar with Tulsa, familiar with Wilmington, these attacks follow a very specific pattern. And, like I say all the time, oppressors never change their playbook. They just don't. So, it's one perceived offense by a member of the Black community is enough to allow white folks the carte blanche to just attack wholesale Black communities. And we see this happen historically over and over and over again. And then Memphis was no different. And this mob terror lasted for 3 whole days, and during which 46 Africans and 2 white people died. 285 people were injured, and at least 5 people recounted having been subjected to SA. 2 of these 5 survivors were Frances Thompson and her friend and roommate Lucy Smith. And on June 1st, 1866, Frances and 170 other brave people testified at a special congressional hearing that was held at the Gayoso, and if Memphians, if I'm saying this wrong, y'all correct me, but the Gayoso House Hotel in Memphis. Describing the horror of what she had endured, Frances Thompson became the first known transgender person to testify before a U.S. congressional committee. And even though the U.S., of course, never convicted anyone of the crimes committed during the Black community during those riots, Miss Frances made history. And heartbreakingly, a decade later in 1876, Frances was arrested for cross-dressing in Memphis. And if you want a little more explanation of the laws that allowed that to happen, I'm also linking it in my sources in the notes. But these laws gave the establishment pretty much carte blanche to harass transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people well into the 20th century. We're going to see this again. We're going to see this again. You're going to see it in the 20s, and you're going to see it at Stonewall. And after being arrested, Frances was subjected to a degrading physical examination, and it was discovered, her teeth was discovered. And all of the, a smear campaign was launched against her and all of the brave folks who dared to testify in front of Congress against what had happened to them during the Memphis riot. They used the fact that Frances had been assigned male at birth to discredit her story of what had happened to her and to her friend and what the larger community had endured. And life became much more difficult for Frances once she was incarcerated. While she was in jail, she was forced to wear men's clothing, and she was forced to labor on a chain gang. And she was cruelly, which it boils my blood to think about it, but she was put on display for the entertainment of whatever nasty onlookers had heard her story and decided that they wanted to come and look at her. And I will personally say that I hope those responsible for doing this to her died a slow, lonely, and painful death. But through everything that she was forced to deal with, Miss Frances never gave up her right to dignity and respect. And when she was questioned about her gender, she would tell people none of your damn business, as she should have. Frances served the jail sentence, and she moved north, where she eventually fell ill. And members of her community took her to the hospital, but on November 1st, 1876, Frances Thompson passed away at age 35 or 36. She's too young. And so today we're going to lift the name of this ancestor, Frances Thompson, who was subjected to the unimaginable, but never lost sight of her dignity, her right to respect, and the right of her humanity. Big love and big honor to Frances Thompson. And so, yeah, that's the story of our ancestor. And I thank y'all for being with me again today. And I hope that y'all will look into not only Miss Frances's story, but also the folks who were may not have made history, but the history of transgender folks and gender nonconforming folks and non-binary folks in pre-colonial Africa, in the Americas. Get to know them, get to know those histories, because we have a lot of forces that are attacking our communities and saying things that are untrue, and I'm not seeing the level of rebuttals that I'd like to see. Our trans family is our family, and we need to be standing up and fighting for them. So I hope that what you learn strengthens and solidifies for y'all the understanding that we have got to stand with our transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming family. These are our friends. These are our coworkers. These are our neighbors. These are nieces and nephews. These are our sibs. We need to be there with them in this fight. And we have to call the attacks on these members of our communities exactly what they are. They're cowardly and they're unnecessary. Cowardly and unnecessary. And I hope that y'all will think of Miss Frances when you reach out to support legislation that affirms transgender humanity and ensures safety in public spaces, which is the thing that's being challenged right now, and into employment discrimination, the fact that the attacks on our transgender family, particularly Black and brown trans women, need to be called for what they are. Those are hate crimes. And so I hope that she is somebody you will be thinking about in standing up against these attacks on our family. And I hope that she comes to mind when people in our own bio families and communities are being evil about trans people and need to be corrected. Don't be afraid to do it. If you are cisgender, as I am, your accomplishment is needed by our transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming relatives right now. So don't be afraid to step up. There is a level of privilege, even if you're queer, that comes with being cisgender. And we need to own that, and we need to use that to the advantage of our family that is being victimized. So step up. And I will see y'all next time. My sources will be in the notes.